All right, here we go. We're on the second subheading of the second heading of the End of Era, Chapter 39, End of Empire. So we're talking about Black African nationalism and independence. And we're going to see a lot of this specifically in sub-Saharan Africa. And the big idea here is something that we already talked about before, is there's these Pan-African movements, which will be really are emerging actually in some cases in the United States and the Caribbean. And so that's going to lead to something that we're going to call negritude, or celebration of negritude, or blackness. So this is similar to the idea of today you'll hear about like celebrate black excellence. And so it's the idea of reviving and celebrating the traditions and cultures and so on and so forth that were in Africa before the Europeans came. So where does this come from? Well, it comes from the United States and the Caribbean, some of those intellectuals. Also, we have a new urban African elite that has been, just as you saw with like Gandhi in Asia, some of the best and brightest of these African colonies had already started to, study in Europe at times, or at the very least, get under the tutelage of the white settlers that were there. And so as they got educated, they would come up with these ideas, and we could see them in a lot of ways. We could see them in demonstrations. We see them in worker strikes in Rhodesia. We see them in some of the Christian teachings in the Belgian Congo. And again, it's this idea of negritude. There's a great poem here, Dry Your Tears, Africa, which talks about and kind of encapsulates the negritude idea, this idea of Africa being this land of such great possibilities, and Africans returning, and the people in Africa rising up to have their time. So when it comes to the African independence, there's going to be a few things which are going to stand in the way of that happening. So one of which is going to be World War II, of course, which is really going to kind of subvert everything else that's happening on the planet at that point. The other thing is that the attitudes that Europeans are going to have, or the white settlers, that the black Africans are somehow inferior. So that wrong assumption that they're incapable of governing themselves. That's particularly present with the white settlers, who have the most to lose, obviously, if they lose the European colonization there. Another thing that's going to slow things down is the politics of the Cold War. So some of these white settlers or European powers are going to claim, hey, these people who want to rise up are communist. And so that gives them more justification trying to shut it down. So there's a lot of different ways that these African colonies will become countries. Some peaceful, some violent. Ghana in 57, you'll notice, is if I do that, that's basically sub-Saharan Africa. So if you take a look here, Ghana's right here. We'll talk about them in the next heading. But we can see a lot of the years we see here are in the 60s specifically. But through this time, for the next couple of decades after World War II, sub-Saharan Africa essentially becomes free. Now, just because they become free, that means free from direct European control. There's going to be all sorts of issues of decolonization. In some cases, there will be civil war, like Rwanda, Burundi, and Angola. Other times, one of the big issues is just going to be economic instability and political and ethnic divisiveness, because it's really important to remember that the borders in Africa were created with the Europeans in mind. How can they make the most money off of this? And so they've got these export economies, and what do you do about that? And or even, with the Europeans out, do we stay a country? Do we, all the infrastructure is built for us to be a country, but if we're different ethnic groups or have different beliefs, then should we be? So one of the things we also see is we see a lot of new names being developed um, that are more African in scope as the people in Africa rise up to to claim their independence. All right, so that's the heading. I'll see you in the next one.